Yeah, okay, so we were going to start the session, so I guess as an introduction.
There you go.
Yeah, it should be okay. Yeah. Richard and I got interested in kind of the productivity space at around the same time. We've collaborated a lot on social media and that sort of thing, and it's kind of ironic that we went from presenting on social media, which is the ultimate time waster, to presenting on productivity. I think we got involved because probably the feeling of being overwhelmed all the time is very common for clinician scientists and especially for trainees. For me, I remember in fellowship, so GI fellowship here at SickKids, in my research fellowship, I would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat about something that I forgot to do or something that needed to be done and the deadline was in 2 days and I totally forgot about it. And we also shared an office, all the GI fellows shared an office, there was about 15 of us, and there were fellows from Chile and Israel and Australia and Germany and people who were not exactly always totally quiet all the time. It was a very collegial, like friendly group, but I would get in at about 8:30 in the morning. I would feel like I would try to get work done, get distracted very easily, want to go home at 5 to have dinner with my kids, and feel like at the end of the day I didn't get anything done. So at that point, I sort of started to get interested in what techniques can I use to make this better. And I read a book that kind of changed my life, as I'll show you in a second. So we're going to start the workshop with sort of 10 minutes each on what we do ourselves in terms of our daily routine. And so this is basically what I do. So this is my office at CHIO. 2 screens, so note 2 screens, which has been scientifically proven to improve productivity. So having multiple screens, being able to flip back and forth between 2 screens, if you're looking at data and then writing at the same time and stuff like that. So I find it very difficult. I can do it. I can work on my laptop, but I find it difficult to work with 1 screen now that I've gotten used to 2 large screens. You can also see my coffee, which with this $10 coffee heater, which I'm sure the hospital would freak out if they knew that I was using. But essential. My headphones, even in my own office. So at SickKids, when I was a fellow, I started to get used to working with noise-canceling headphones because that way I just would put them in and I wouldn't hear all the people around me. And I just got used to working with them. And now my headphones, actually, I use it because I have a playlist of music that I listen to when I'm getting deep, focused work done, as we'll talk about in a second. So my headphones are on when I'm working all the time. This area here, can you guys, I guess you can't see where I'm pointing, there we go. This area here is my folders, so it's my paper, which is really, so I use Getting Things Done, which includes 31 folders, 1 for every day of the month. And if there's something paper that comes in that I need to keep for a meeting, let's say on the 14th of the month, I'll put it in there so that every day I check the folder to see if there's any paper in there that I need to deal with. And then I have 1 folder for each month. So, every month I rotate out from the monthly folder to the daily folder. And then there's an inbox there as well. Note, I put my phone way up here, and I did this myself. The hospital didn't. I put it way out of the way because I don't use my phone very often at all. And then other parts of the office, a whiteboard, which I don't use frequently to brainstorm. A little bit, sometimes I do. Mostly it's to keep my most important tasks for the week, which we'll talk about there, and important due dates and things like that, sort of milestone stuff. So for me, the morning routine is absolutely essential. Like that to me is how I get my day going, and that's how I trigger my mind into knowing, okay, now it's time to do what I need to get done. And so this is kind of my morning routine, and I think a routine of some sort, sometimes morning, sometimes evening, I think a lot of people find that very useful in terms of getting going in the morning so that you're not floundering in the morning. And I think Richard will talk about eating the frog, probably, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll leave that for a second. That's a little promo. So I usually wake up between 5 and 5:30 now. So I started doing that in fellowship because remember I said that I'd get into work at 8:30 and everybody was around and I felt like I got nothing done and I was socializing most of the day. So I started getting to work in fellowship at 7. Keeping surgeon hours. I would never have predicted when I was a med student that I'd be voluntarily waking up and getting to work for 7 a.m. But those hours in the morning before people come in are my most productive hours. So I'll wake up 5:30, depending on if I'm going to the gym. I aim to go to the gym about 5 days a week, but 2 of them are on weekends. So 4 or 5 days a week, always Tuesday, always Friday, and then hopefully 1 extra day in there. I then go to the office. This is something that I still do, which we can talk about. I still check email first thing in the morning when I get to the office, which a lot of people recommend you don't do. But I'm not checking, it's hard for me not to check. I'm checking, I'm processing. I'm not checking and responding with long emails. I'm trying to clear my inbox and process everything so that I know that everything is done and then I can concentrate on the important stuff. So it's not dictating what I have to do that day.
Please. Your attention, please. This is building security. There will be testing of the fire alarm system. Elevator operation will not be affected. Further announcements will be made to keep you advised.
I can talk loud over a fire alarm. I check it in order to process it, not to define what I'm going to do for that day. Okay. I then will journal, and I journal I journal every single day, and I'll show you what format. I don't just journal my feelings or anything like that. I journal specific format and answer specific questions. I've started, about 2 years ago, I started meditating for 15 minutes. And the benefit, we can talk more about meditation, but the benefit for me for journaling and meditation is the journaling focuses me on what I need to get done that day.
Your attention, please.
I don't know how many times they have to announce it.
There will be testing of the fire
in Ottawa, it would be English and French and then stop. At least that, yeah.
Further announcements will be made to keep you advised.
So journaling really focuses me on what I need to get done and what I got done in the previous day. Meditation has taught me how to recognize when my mind is getting distracted. So it's more of a mindfulness meditation where it teaches you to recognize, for me, if I'm getting angry, if I'm getting frustrated, if I'm distracted by something, and then bring myself back to where I want to be. So I find that extremely important, and I do it every single day. And then I get to work. So there's definitely a routine there that takes some time in the morning. So my journaling this is the format that I use. It's a brief summary of my previous day and my thoughts, and then I have a question template that I answer. Firstly, what did I learn yesterday? So did I learn anything new? And sometimes it's nothing, unfortunately, but sometimes, if I've learned something, if I've read a paper that's important, I try to quickly summarize it in one line. What can I do to make today better? Just, what can I do today to make my life a little bit easier? And then my 3 most important tasks for the day. So this is what I write down. If I get these 3 things done, no matter what other distractions are going on in the day, I'm happy with the progress that I made today, okay? And then I summarize what I accomplished yesterday. So did I get my 3 most important tasks done yesterday? And then in terms of gratitude, obviously there's a lot of research that shows that, saying what you're grateful for does help improve your mood and your view on life. So I do say 3 things that I'm grateful for the previous day. And then how was I giving in some way? How did I try to make a difference in somebody else's life in some way the previous day? And then equally important to the daily journaling is a weekly review that I do. The weekly review I do usually on Monday mornings, and I'll show you I block time in my calendar for a weekly review, Monday morning from 7 to 9. And in it, I talk about what are my major accomplishments in the previous week, what are my 5 to 7 most important tasks for next week, what are some of the guilt and frustrations that I have, like what have I not made progress on that I really want to make progress on, and then Pomodoro timer. So I use a Pomodoro timer, which is, does anybody know what a Pomodoro timer is? So Pomodoro in Italian, does anybody speak Italian? It means tomato. So it's a tomato timer, right? So it's used for cooking, where you set your timer, it's the shape of a little tomato, and you use it for cooking. What it's become is a timer for actually focused work, right? So there's lots of Pomodoro apps you can get on phones, you can get a physical timer if you want to, but essentially the theory is if you focus for 25 minutes and not get distracted with deep focused work for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, you're going to get a lot done. And I actually have an app that tracks the segments of 25 minutes that I do. I actually tend to do 50 minutes with a 10-minute break because I just find that 25 minutes I'm just getting going. But that avoids the distraction in that time, in that 25 minutes, so that you can get deep focused work done and then allow yourself a body rest of 5 minutes afterwards. And then every 4 segments you take a longer break. So I summarize how many segments I was actually able to do in that week. So this is really the book that changed everything for me in terms of reading it in fellowship. getting things done. It's a productivity system. So it's, I think there's two major books that I would recommend if you're interested in this space and, trying to learn a new technique and learn new skills. One is Getting Things Done, and this certainly isn't for everybody, because it really does take, a very organized type of work ethic. But essentially what it says is that it doesn't allow anything to remain in your brain, right? So you're getting input all the time from different places, email, paper, other people coming in and telling you what you need to get done, things like that. If you try to remember all of that, if you try to prioritize it in your brain, everything is going to go up in smoke. So what it says is as you bring stuff in, you bring it into an in basket, and you might have multiple in baskets, and then you process it, right? So if it takes 2 minutes or less, just do it. If it takes more than 2 minutes, you need to put it on a task management list of some sort or software and prioritize it in some way. And so that goes for your email as well. So I subscribe to Inbox Zero, meaning my email is processed for sure at the end of every day, where my inbox is completely clear. And a lot of that stuff goes onto a task management app, but some of it will go to other things. And then the other book that I would strongly recommend is Deep Work. And the idea of deep work is that we're full now as knowledge workers, we're full of distractions, right? There's constant notifications, there's constant distractions on your screen, in person. The idea is that if you can focus on working deeply without those distractions, every distraction, they say, costs you 25 minutes. So if you're in the middle of deep work and you get distracted, it'll take you 25 minutes to get back to the productivity point where you were before. And we've all had that feeling when we're really productive, right? We're working deeply, we really feel like totally absorbed in what we're doing. And that feeling, that feeling of working deeply is where we get the most benefit in terms of productivity. So even if you can get 4 hours of deep work done in a day, you're going to be far better off than all the people around you who are distracted on a constant basis. The other thing I do is use my calendar very, very extensively, as you can see. Some things to point out on my calendar. I know it's hard to read over there, I apologize. But so this is my weekly review from in this week it was 6 to 8, because I had to scope at 8. But so every morning, Monday morning, is when I do my weekly review and I figure out what I want to get done that week. The other thing is that I do block off in my calendar when I'm going to the gym, so that it's a commitment to myself, right? It's an appointment with myself that I'm blocking that off. And then finally, I have this segment every Friday morning from 9 to 12, DW for deep work. So that's when I write, right? So I've blocked off in my calendar that this is going to be writing time, whether it's writing a grant or writing a paper, and I will not do anything else in that time but write. Because that's really, in the end, as scientists, that's how we're going to be evaluated, right? Is how much we get out, how much we get grants, and how much we get publications. So I block that in my time. I'll move a little quicker. So some tips that I would recommend, non-technology related. Turn off all notifications. Remember the distraction thing? Those notifications, that Outlook pop-up where you've got an email with a little blurb afterwards, the ding that you get on your phone, totally distracting, right? So completely turn it off, especially when you're doing that deep work. Establish a routine, as I mentioned. Establish and work on your most important tasks for the day or the week. Close your door. Don't allow people to interrupt you. If you have a private office, close it when you're getting work done, right? The open door policy is very nice and friendly, but allowing people to come in and hijack your day, which is what it is not effective. Have office hours if you're staff, right? If you have block time. And then block time. I forgot to mention the other thing that we have in here in the calendar is, actually I don't have it on this week, but usually I have time to review with my nurse, right? So clinical review with the nurse. So I've blocked off time, so she'll save everything that's not an emergency to Thursday mornings at 9 when we run through all the patients and do clinical review. And then say no to everything, especially at the beginning, right? As junior scientists, like when you get hired on, your job is going to be getting grants and publications. And any committee invitation you get, any offer you get, it's flattering to say, you're new, enthusiastic, we want you on our committee, help us. You may even feel like you're an expert in the field. Don't do it. For the first 2 or 3 years at least, your job is to get grants and publications and nothing else. And then tech-related tips, again, turn off notifications, schedule time to check email. I'm bad at this. I used to take pride in checking it and responding immediately. That's wrong. I now try to check it 3 times a day, morning, lunch, and before I go out in the afternoon. But I'm not great at it. If you can, schedule times when you're going to check your email. Use a time tracker, which we'll talk about. Use a task manager. If you want, I'll show you mine. I use Todoist. Try to clear your inboxes daily. Use a scheduler. So for me, Doodle, and I'll show you this in a bit if you want, I can send an email to somebody with a link, and they can, if they need an appointment with me, they will schedule that appointment in there without these back and forth emails all the time. I'll show you that as an example in a second. My evening routine, I don't have one really. It's to spend time with my kids. That's my most important thing. It ends up being watching Netflix, and it ends up being crashing. I just, waking up at 5:30, I don't have time. I don't have the energy or the time to get anything productive done in the evening. So it's really about spending family time only. The apps that I use, yeah. 9:30 to 10:30, somewhere thereabouts. Yeah. So I'm the type of person that needs at least 7 hours of sleep, or else I'm not as effective the next day. So I'm not one of those. I wish I was, of 4 hours of sleep, and then that's it. I'm not. So Google Apps, Outlook, Dropbox, Todoist is my task manager. Evernote we can talk about a little bit. And then my Moleskine notebook, right? I journal on paper. I don't journal in an app, although you can journal in an app if you're more comfortable. Headspace for meditation. And then we can show you rescue time, my Pomodoro timer, text expander I can discuss if you want to, and then the doodle poll. And that's how I work. We'll move on to
I'll present,
Richard work, and then we'll lots of time for
discuss,
discussion.
okay?
Yeah.
I'm just going to stand on this side. Okay, so this is a little bit on how I work. And again, like Eric said, it started off by me being totally overwhelmed at some point and trying to find a way to get a grasp again on what I was doing. And so this is my setup, aligned a little bit with how Eric explained it. So I have a standing desk that you can put up and down, so you can stand. And I like to do it especially if I'm at my desk all day and writing, just to get up. I ordered it online. It's a big box, but you can just order this for a few $100s. I have a little IKEA chair that I use when sometimes I read stuff, or if I'm on call, I have to wait for stuff in the middle of the night, and I can take a quick nap. It's pretty clean right now, but normally it's a little bit less organized. So in my perfect world, this would be my morning routine. Wake up at 6, and I've just decided the last week that I'm going to try and wake up a little earlier again to make use of the extra time in the morning, and then just go to bed earlier at night. I was always an evening person. I thought I was really good at staying up late and working till 12, 1 o'clock. My wife would be in bed at 9:30, 10, and then I would get it done, right? But I've switched, so you're able to switch, because it was not very nice to be married to somebody and then she would be in bed and I'd be working. And you actually can switch it around. So I'm going to bed earlier now and getting up earlier. So waking up at 6, drink a large glass of water, meditate for 10 minutes. I use an app, like I use Calm now. I've used Headspace as well. I think it's really important. I learned about this at a CCHCSP meeting. I don't think you were there, but we were walking with some people and we were discussing some issues that everybody always has. And then somebody mentioned, well, you should try out mindfulness. And I did. I downloaded the app and I tried it, and every day, 10 minutes is enough. And it just helps me kind of be a bit more relaxed. Then I like to work out for 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes it's a run, sometimes it's swimming, sometimes it's just a walk. And I actually, with my wife, sometimes do the Nike training app. And we do a workout together. So we spend some time together in the morning before the kids get up. Then I really value having breakfast with my family in the morning. So even though I'm a surgeon, I take advantage of the fact that I'm also a scientist, so I don't have to always show up at 7. So I really enjoy that, and then commute to work. And I try to get an exercise there as well, either using my bike or run. Even in the wintertime I run, I don't bike in Winnipeg. And then I like to drop off my kids along the way to school, just to have a little 10 minutes with them in the car and talk with them. That's getting less and less because they're getting older. But then arrive between 8 and 9, review my agenda for the day. And again, this is in a perfect world. I think this maybe happens 20% of the time, because a lot of the time I don't stick with this. Even though I talk about it, I know what I need to do, but it's just hard. And then I would start working on the 3 to 6 tasks for which the importance and order was decided at the end of the previous workday. So I know exactly what I need to do. And that's where I haven't put in the slide, but eating the frog, that was a quote, and it means that if you eat a frog first thing in the morning, that's probably going to be the worst thing you have to do that day, right? So if you start with the thing that you really don't like to do, get that out of the way, that's your most important thing, then you got a good start of your day. I've learned that if I have about 1 to 2 hours of block time in my schedule right now, I have a good day. The rest is pretty much taken up by meetings and clinical tasks or research tasks. But if I have about 1 to 2 hours to really work on what I want to work on, that's a good day. Preferably, in addition to that, I would have 1 to 2 hours of unscheduled time for the phone call that comes and they say, well, can you look at this, or can we meet quickly to discuss this? Again, only in a perfect world, but I keep aiming for it. Then at the end of the day, I've completed my task list. I spent only 2 to 3 Pomodoros on processing email. I would either archive my emails in Evernote or put them on the to-do list in OmniFocused, or respond if it's less than 2 minutes to respond to. I'm not inbox zero at all. I still have probably 20, 30 emails that I have to do something with, and then I have archive stuff. So I tried it, but it's getting too much. Like I've tried to triage a little bit, and I don't think I miss a lot with doing that, but I always am, and I feel like somebody told me once that email is almost like somebody else writing on your to-do list, right? So somebody sends you an email, and then it's off their task list, but then they expect you to respond to it immediately or get it done. And I have to decide on that, right? I have to decide what I do. And so I try to teach people, maybe passively, that they can't just send me an email saying you have to do this and then do it immediately. I try to push back a little bit on that. So then at the end of the day, I would review my agenda and determine the 3 to 6 tasks for the next day. Leave work between 5 to 6. That doesn't always happen, but I try that. And then in the evening, spend time with my family or do some other things, but not necessarily work. That doesn't always happen. Then on Sunday, I do a weekly review, about 1 hour, review of the week before, clean up any open ends and stuff that I've collected over the week, review and prepare for the next week, review my OmniFocus to-do list, and then determine the most important task for the week. So I also use this technique a little bit. So Eric already explained it. I recommend to at least read a little bit about it. It's an interesting technique. And the main thing, as Eric said, is to get everything out of your head, so you don't keep walking around thinking about stuff all the time that you have to do. So this is my calendar, and I still have to talk to you, Eric, about that Calendly, because you're using
I use Doodle.
Oh, you use Doodle
Yeah.
for that? But you have to connect it to your Google Calendar, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that with patient information?
Don't. No, so this is only for the academic stuff.
Yeah, because I have, my secretary puts in my patient that I have to operate, including their hospital number and all that stuff. So I have to use the Exchange.
Yeah, so I
server
don't
for that.
operate, but I ask that none of, like my patient, so I do sync between Google and Outlook. So Outlook is my hospital calendar.
Yeah.
I use an app called G-Sync It, which will
Yeah.
link Google and Outlook, but I don't want even initials in my calendar, right? So they can point me to, I sometimes there's an MRN in there, like a medical record number, but even that is a little bit dicey, so
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
So I can't use that then. Yeah. So non-tech tips, I agree with Eric, like if you have a routine and you have habits, then it's a lot easier, right? If you get up every morning at the same time, even on the weekends, that helps. If you, like that, you're in charge of your time, right? So it's up to you to either start checking email or do a workout first. But if you create routines, that helps a lot to stick with it. you have to prioritize your own health, family, and relationships. If you crash, then there's no productivity, right? So you have to make that a real priority, I find. You have to block time in your calendar, and the better I do that, the more productive I am. So if I look ahead for about a month and I block like at least those 2 hours a day in my calendar, so they can't. And if you think about it, like if you get a secretary or somebody who can access your calendar, they just want to get it done, right? So if they get a request for a meeting with a student or with somebody, they'll just put it in the next day if they see a hole. So you have to protect that yourself. I've discussed that with my secretary. I actually have 3 because I do different roles. So they have a clinical, a research, and somebody for a leadership role that I have. But I've explained to them that Monday, Wednesday, Friday are mainly my clinical and admin days. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I want to do my research stuff. And then if they want to put anything in those days that is not appropriately, they'll just discuss it and I can approve it. But at least that protects it a little bit. So the getting things done, so it's organized, review, plan, then do, and then repeat again. So you have to kind of get into that cycle. The 80-20 Pareto principle, do people know what that means? It's an economy principle, and it says that 80% of the wealth in the world is kind of produced and owned by 20% of the people. So if you apply that to your kind of work, if you would be strategic and do 20% of your work really well, you would do 80% of your outcomes would be really good. In order to get those additional 20%, to make it 100%, you would work the additional 80%. So if you identify your most efficient and effective task, you can get a lot done with only 20% of your effort. And the one mistake I would say I made when I started is I started delegating way too late. And I'm still struggling with that. I think when you start out, you have to think about what you have to do and what you can have other people do. Because by the time you really need to start delegating after a few years, you don't really have the time anymore to explain it to people and to get them to do it the way you would like them to do it. So at some point, I'm running a lab with basic science, so we have all these animal protocols that we have to renew twice a year. And at some point, I just couldn't get it done anymore. When I started, I did all that myself. I wrote the protocols, I reviewed it, I submitted it, I answered the questions. So then I had to make a decision that actually was going to fail a little bit for that. I started to let my technician do it and accepting that it wasn't going to be perfect the first few times, which was hard for me to accept. I like stuff to be perfect. But then I accepted that we were going to submit it, and then we probably had to respond 1 or 2 times to get it done. Whereas before I would get it done in 1 round. But then after a few of those rounds, now I can let my technician do it completely and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So that is the one mistake I made, I think. I waited too long with delegating stuff. The same with papers. Like how many, probably everybody submits their own papers. Do you still do that or not?
Yeah, I like to do it.
I find I'm becoming the limiting factor for that. So I would have a paper that's ready to be submitted, and then I need probably 1 hour, 2 hours to get through all the online clicking and entering all the names of everybody and their email addresses. And it just gets pushed away then because I have other stuff that's, in my mind, more urgent. And so I've started to delegate that to students and postdocs. And actually my next step for planning, if I get a new big grant, I'm going to hire somebody to do that part-time for me. Because if you think about it in my mind, I need to think about my research, right? I need to be creative. I need to talk to my students. I need to coach them. And even my postdoc, or if they do it, I think it's a waste of time. That's a pure admin job in my mind. So those are things you can and should probably think about delegating and save time.
So, I mean, it depends also on what you enjoy, right? What you get personal fulfillment from.
Yeah, that's true.
For me, hitting that submit button when a paper is ready is really, I love it. It's a great feeling. But I mean, I could delegate the input, the entry of a lot of the stupid.
I enjoy it when I get the email that the paper has been submitted.
But another thing is updating the CV, right? Because I'm a very quantitatively focused person, I like updating my CV. When a paper is accepted, to put that onto my CV gives me personal enjoyment. And I know that my admin assistant could do that. but I like it, so I stay with it.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to find that balance, right? I think a lot of these things are knowing yourself, and as Eric says, if you enjoy stuff, you shouldn't probably delegate it and enjoy it while you're doing it. And the other thing, like Eric and I gave a talk like this before, and then afterwards somebody came up to me, my mentor, and he said, well, where's the human aspect in all of this? Like, this is so like scientific and so quantified and data driven, right? And I'm learning, going up in the ranks now, that it's sometimes a lot more effective to walk over to somebody and spend 5 or 10 minutes talking to them, as opposed to sending an email responding to something. And I actually get fun out of that, doing that, more than sitting behind my computer sending off another email. And that's another thing. I think you have to keep that in mind. Like, it's easy to get more and more effective and more productive by just finding ways of being quicker at responding, being quicker at doing your email and your task. But in the end, like, we all kind of are human beings, and we need to interact with each other. So I think you can be sometimes way more effective by just reaching out to somebody. Some tech tips, like Eric said, turn off notification and close your email, like the 2 screens. I like that too. I like that a lot. If your email is open somewhere, that's easy to take another quick look. Schedule and limit time for email to only 2 to 3 Pomodoros. I try to do that now more and more. Still not perfect at it, but like, set the clock, start working on it for 25 minutes, and then actually stop, as opposed to trying to keep going and finish that last. And if you do that 2-3 times a day, you'll get it done. And then use a to-do list. And I think that's the GTD, like that whole to-do list. If you spend a Sunday afternoon getting everything out of your head on a list and look at it and say, well, you know what, I need to do this first and that alone, I think, gives a lot of stress relief. Because a lot of the time you think, oh, I have so many things and I can't keep up. And then I think it's about staying balanced. So I like to do stuff outside of work, and I think it's and that's in the paper that we distributed as well. I think it's very important to spend time on this as well. And by trying to be more productive during the day, you get time to do these other things to stay balanced. So these are the apps and tools. I went back to a paper planner again for my daily stuff. I go back and forth. I also like to spend sometimes a little bit of money on getting a fancy new tool and then try it out for a few months. And then, I enjoy like sitting down and thinking about what am I going to do and then write that. Okay, so maybe we should do some questions, and maybe if you want to, we didn't do introduction, maybe we should ask them to introduce yourself quickly and then maybe give us your one productivity tip. Yeah, like, well, you have kids, I have kids, and you don't want to be famous for missing out on spending time with them, right? Like, everybody's busy. Like, I don't know, you talk to a lot of people who are not busy, so it's up to you how you kind of distribute your time between them, and also with your partner. Like, we've scheduled date night every Wednesday night. And sometimes we sit down and talk about our finances, but still, like, we spend time together purposely, as opposed to just kind of running a business at home, right? And it's easy to disconnect around the time where you're getting kids, and it's we were talking this morning. There's an interesting article in the Harvard Business Review this month on parenting and career. And if you register, you can get it for free. I think you can get 3 articles a month for free. But it talks about like how, as a parent, you're going to miss out on certain activities. Like, your kid might walk the first few steps and you might not be there because you're so busy with your career. But all those things are kind of part of it. And like, as you say, you have to forgive yourself for some of these things. It's not necessarily that you're doing really bad things to your kid, but this is part of the choices you've made. And just being forgiving to yourself and be mindful of that helps a lot already. Yeah.
So we don't have much time left. Why don't we talk about the time tracking thing that we asked you guys to do? And that's part of, really, for me, that was part of being mindful, right? Like, to know where my time is going. I can quickly show you what I do. Maybe I'll show the rescue time slides. Sure. So
yours, right? Yeah.
I use Rescue Time. I use an app because I find obviously I'm mostly in front of the computer when I'm working in terms of the type of research that I do with databases and that sort of thing. This is an example week from the end of May of where I spent time. And what Rescue Time does is it's a little app that sits at the bottom right of your screen and logs all your time and where you're going and the websites and everything. There's also an iPhone app or iOS app where it'll track your time on your phone. I turn that off. I don't want to know where I'm on my phone. It's not. And then if you pay, you can get more detailed stats, but you can also log offline time. So you can log where you are. If you're in clinic, you just log that time you were in clinic. So what I found, number one, is it helps me know what I'm doing, and it assigns you a score. So you assign each website as very distracting, neutral, productive, or very productive. The only thing I log as very productive is writing. So basically writing or creating slides for a presentation or things like that, that's very productive. Neutral is my clinical work because I do it, but that's not why I'm there, right? I'm there to do research. And then very distracting is obviously things like social media and that sort of thing. And so it assigns you a score where this is about average for me, about sort of 68 to 70 is kind of normal. But if I achieve higher than that, I know that it's been a very productive week. You can look at what you've been doing that week, both within and outside normal office time. And that's sort of what I've been doing. And then I set myself a goal of not being on distracting sites for more than 30 minutes a day, maximum, and that's usually lunchtime. You can see this week was a good week. I made it for each of those. And then optimally, writing for 2 hours a day, which almost never happens, but you can see that Friday, it happens frequently because I've logged that 3 hours time block. It also helped me because, let me look at categories actually. It helped me because it will tell you, I would get frustrated that I was in clinic, or it felt like clinic was always, and that's sort of the curse of the clinician scientist, is we're doing clinical work, but it's also our blessing. However, if you're told that you're protected for 25% of your time doing clinical and 75% research, you should know where your time is going, right? So if Epic or other electronic health records are constantly distracting you, if you're being called to do extra clinics. So I would sometimes get frustrated that it felt like the clinical work was eating into all of the time that I was promised, or a lot more than I thought. And in fact, by doing this, I learned that it wasn't nearly as bad, right? So for the 51 hours for this week happened, I know that I was at 12 and a half hours, either in direct patient care or on Epic doing charting and that sort of thing. So not bad at all, right? That's about the 25%. And some weeks are better than others, but it helps you kind of keep grounded and keep mindful that this is what you're doing with your day. If you look at a week recently where I actually had booked off and there was no clinics at all, that was this week, you'll see that my score was actually quite a bit better, right? 75 instead of 69, and I was able to achieve writing on 4 of the 5 days. And less patient work because I was less on Epic, less patient care. So for me, again, numbers oriented, it gives you a black and white picture of what you're doing and where your time is going and that sort of thing. And there's other apps. Richard uses Toggle. That's only Mac. Rescue Time is both Mac and PC. There's Timer app, which is also just Mac. A lot of these are just Mac, but Rescue Time is an excellent PC option.
So is this linked to the calendar?
It is not linked to my
No,
calendar.
it's linked to use of your computer.
Yeah, it's linked to the actual computer use overall.
Yeah. So if you are in Word, it would track it. If you are on a website doing stuff, it would track it.
You can add offline time. If you're doing something here, you add offline time. This is sort of stuff that I do regularly.
That's for the paid version, right?
That's the paid version, yeah. 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 To do it? Yeah, we can show you. Let maybe one person before we go to that. Anybody sort of track their time over the week?
What do you think?
A lot of time on this job application.
That's okay. That's an important task, I think.
Yeah, but this is another example though. Sometimes things take longer than you think they will though.
Yeah.
When I put this down in, I think you had suggested half an hour chunks.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I spent a lot of time. I also had a psych lunch that I was like, oh, that's something because into this other meeting.
Well, it gives you insight then, right? What you're spending your time on. And to take it one level up, you'll learn, if you do this for a longer time, how much time you actually spend on certain tasks. And then you could block those into a really granular level in your, like I read a book, it's in Dutch, so I couldn't recommend it. But that person actually recommended to schedule every single task up to half an hour into your calendar.
Yeah.
So schedule 7 to 7 every single half hour on your
So
day.
that's called time blocking or
Yeah.
time blocking,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
And that's a productivity tool as well, that where you do it the night before and you specifically say when you're going to work. I can't do that. I find that very hard to do. But some people do that.
Yeah, and then he said, like, that's the way you're going to do your work. So if you do that and you know kind of how long it will take, then as soon as you notice that you're going over, then you should question, well, what's happening, right? Why am I doing this? And did I either make a mistake, I need to use more time, or should it be done by now?
The other thing you could do for, these social things, they're great, but some of them suck up a lot of time and tail with it, like people start delaying you. So what I started doing is I have blocked my social time, and at exactly the time I want to leave, I book another meeting. I have to go.
Yeah.
Because these kind of things can drag on, and it takes
One thing I still try to practice is when somebody sets a meeting up for me, to have like 15 minutes in between that meeting and the next meeting, so you can finish up the last meeting, right? And actually spend some time on how to process it, and if there's a task you need to prepare for, so that you have a little bit of time in between. Because like if you have an hour for a meeting, you'll spend the hour, right? It's not like after 20 minutes you say, well, you know what, we're done, let's, most of the time you'll spend it.
Another pattern I noticed, I was doing a response to reviewers on a paper, and I am not noticing this until after, I took a break from it for a couple of days, and when I went back to it, I don't think that would have taken me as long had I just continued maybe even the next morning or somehow prioritized that differently, because I had to reread all the response to it. It just took me a while to get back into it.
I've started making my default appointments 30 minutes long. For the meeting.
So have I.
I've done that too,
Because you can usually get it done in 30 minutes, but if you book it for an hour, it'll take an hour.
And I try to, I do think it's hard to decide which meetings to attend to, right? But I do try to, especially when I take on a new job or something new, I try to attend as many as possible in the beginning so that I can try and weed through it afterwards and know, well, this is just information sharing. I'll read the notes afterwards and skip it, or spend like 15 minutes and then walk out. Or some meetings you really have to be, right? That's where the decisions are made and you want to have a presence. But you don't know which ones in the beginning unless you have attended some of them and learned who's who.
Other things learned?
Evernote at the bottom of your email. I've never figured out.
Oh, I'll show you all of this in a second. Other things learned from the time tracking?
Were people doing this already or not?
I was. I have no idea how to interpret it. What is business? What is utilities?
Well, you decide that, right? So in the end, for rescue time, So if you're categorizing things, the nice thing about things like timer and toggle is you can, but again, Mac only, you can assign it to a project, right? So you can assign a certain task to a project.
Name it yourself,
Yeah, but categorize, and it's up to you, right? So for me, patient care is neutral. I mean, that's a little bit harsh. It drives down my score a little bit because obviously I do patient care, but it depends on.
But does it say somewhere in rescue time what my computer considers business and what it considers?
Well, you can define that after.
Yeah, you can. So if you go to categories, you can look at everything that you've been to and what it's defining it as, and you can recategorize things. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
And you can create your own categories and that sort of thing. So we were talking about the scheduling of calendar events. I'll show you guys Doodle right now. So I use Text Expander to create snippets, which is like if you guys have Epic or if you have EMR, it's smart phrases. It's a hotkey basically that gives you. So if I get an email from somebody requesting a meeting, all I have to do is put semicolon dude, and then it creates this. I don't know how much you can see that. A bit better maybe. So please see my schedule here. Please suggest 2 to 3 times, 30-minute blocks when we can meet. I will accept one of those and you can consider that confirmation of the meeting. Typically Wednesdays don't work due to full day clinics and I'm at the Civic on Tuesdays, right? So then they go to the calendar app, Doodle, and Calendly is the other one. There's a few of those that do this.
Yeah, when I got this from you, when we had to meet for something,
Yeah.
holy mackerel,
It's cool.
this is
Yeah,
so cool.
it's a little bit.
So I spent like an afternoon trying to
impersonal.
figure it out, but then I couldn't
It's a
figure
little
out.
impersonal.
Yeah.
But you can see that they can see when I'm busy, when I'm away, stuff like that, and they can go forward in time. And basically what they do is they request blocks of meetings, hopefully only 30 minutes, although they don't always.
Is this your Google Calendar?
This is linked to my Google Calendar, yes.
Yeah, this is our challenge. We work in these firewalls with a
Yeah, it's the same for us. We can't use it.
So the other thing that you can do, I was thinking with, if you use Outlook with your work, is if you can install G-Sync it, you can install it one way. So it'll put this into your Google Calendar, but then you're only syncing from your Google Calendar to Outlook and not the other way. So you don't sync any patient information the other way, if you can convince them to let you do that. So basically, you create a meeting request, they ask for information, and then I get an email. Anyway, I don't need to go through it, but I get an email saying, this is the meeting request. I accept one of them, and it goes directly into my Google Calendar.
So what I've done for these is I'll respond to the email, CCing my secretary, saying, can you please set up a meeting for, or I'm happy to meet for 30 minutes within the next 2 to 3 weeks. My secretary is CC'd here. She'll arrange for the meeting. So it's almost the same. But then
Yeah, I find that this saves time for the other person as well, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not back and forth with the secretary either.
Yeah.
But same thing.
Yeah.
And then in terms of a to-do manager, I can show Todoist since I have it out. So this is Todoist. I have it set up by project, which is a getting things done type of system where you have projects, and within each project you have your next most important actionable step, your next most important task. So you can see that I have clinical, I have RI stuff, admin stuff. So if you look at any one of these projects, most of them will have something that I need to do or something that I'm waiting for. So for this project, I'm waiting for review of this, right? For this, I'm waiting for a response. Let me find something where I actually have to do something. I'm working on a CIHR grant for this project here, and you can see that I have a bunch of stuff that I have to get done. And again, priority 1, priority 3, priority 2, depending on color. What's important here, and they're all tagged with context. So that's again a getting things done issue, is where are you? And you can, if you're at a specific place, there it is. So my labels are, depending on the place. So if I'm at home, I know that I have to do these things at home. If
do you
I'm
get a notification when you arrive home?
no, I don't have it set to do that.
Okay.
I don't have it set. You
Can
can
do that
set it
very
to do it.
easily in your iPhone too.
Yeah.
Just through
Yeah.
Siri, say, remind me when I get home at 5 o'clock. And then if you have defined home in your iPhone context, it would give you a notification.
So usually I use time reminders if I need to, but you can
Yeah.
also set location reminders with Todoist.
You can do it for groceries. So I've defined our superstore. So whenever I drive by, I get like a reminder about the few things that I want to buy.
So this is an app?
Yeah, Todoist. And OmniFocus does the same.
Is that free or Todoist?
Todoist, the basic version is free, but if you want filters and labels, I think you have to pay. And the filters that I have is essential because I define at the beginning of my week what is priority 1, what are those only thing in priority 1 is my most important tasks for the week, and then I actually have a filter called dashboard that shows me my week at a glance. This is sort of my default filter, where it shows me what's due, what I need to get done for the week, and then right at the bottom there, what are my priority 1 tasks. So I'll work from here. So if I get an email saying I have to do something, let's pretend this is an email that I have to do something, it obviously is. You see that there's a plugin for Gmail, and there's a plugin for Outlook as well. You can install it for Outlook, where you just click on that plugin. It creates a task. I say, okay, it's at computer, priority 1. I'll remove the due date because there's no real due date for it. I'll hit add task. And then if I go back to my Todoist, there it is in the inbox. There it is at the thing. I can move it to a project if I want to. I can click on it, and it goes directly back to that email. Right? So I don't need to find, if I archive that email or I flip it over to my to-do folder here, I don't need to find it. The other thing that I tend, because Shannon was talking about Evernote, the other thing that I tend to do is I tend to keep my reference material in Evernote. So let's say, let me find here. There's this abstract here that I want to keep and I want to do something with, right? So my system is, I'll clip it to Evernote. I'll actually use the Chrome plugin. I don't use the little sidebar or the thing in the email. I'll use the Chrome plugin, clip it to Evernote. Let's say I just put it in my inbox, although I have Evernote folders with every project as well. Okay, let's say I put it in a project. This is for the PIBD systematic review. There it is. Right? I save it to Evernote. Evernote is a note-taking app, but it also stores stuff. It stores your notes. So if I then go over to Evernote, and I just make sure it's synced, I go over, these are all my projects, the same name as with my Todoist. PIBD systematic review, there it is. Right? The attachment is there and everything. I can then copy a link to Evernote, create a task in Todoist, do this task in Evernote, and then for Todoist, if you put it in brackets, and then you paste that Evernote link, right, there it is. I just click on the Evernote link there, and it takes me right back to Evernote, right to the note where I needed to get to. So that's sort of, I mean, obviously it's a bit of a complicated system, but that's the system that I use to make sure that I'm not going to email back and forth all the time. Yeah. Evernote stores the stuff that I need to have. Todoist is only my task manager, right? I don't have attachments in Todoist. I don't, have comments or anything. That's all in Evernote. And Evernote will have, a project planning thing. It'll have any supplemental reading material that I have for any project that I'm working on.
You have to like this stuff a little bit. Yeah. Like I noticed in the beginning when you started, you can spend days on figuring out the best system and reading another blog post about how to use Todoist or OmniFocus, or at some point you actually have to start working, right? So you have to, like both Eric and I are a little bit geeky and liking this kind of linking, but you'll find a way to make it more effective. And
and the key is, systems like getting things done and bullet journal and all of these systems.
It's all based on.
They work, but they may not exactly work that same way for you, right? No. So you kind of have to find your way of working and customize it, and figure out what your most effective way of working is.
Yeah, I used it to do I use OmniFocus, which is a bit more expensive, but what I really like is the tags. So I find it hard to remember what I need to talk about when I meet people. So if I meet with my department head, we meet once a month, so I have some things collected that I tag with his name. So when we meet, I have it right there in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I do that with all the people in my life, kind of, so that it's easy to remember what the topics I wanted to discuss. And I can link emails to that if necessary. So that's what I find really useful.
It's also worth noting that I've started to take notes at meetings on paper instead of with a laptop, I just find it's, you can face the person properly and actually interact, and you also remember it better. Like it's more
and that's
effective.
Been really shown.
Yeah.
Like the laptop note taking is not as good as by hand because you process it differently.
Yeah, but Evernote has an app attached to it called Scannable, where really I can scan the note. It's supposed to be handwriting recognition, although it never seems to work for me for some reason. I think you have to scan it as a picture and not as a PDF, and I prefer to scan it as a PDF. And then I put it in the Evernote folder attached to the project for the thing that so you can see that I have notes for various meetings on this project. Some are a page, some are multiple pages. And so they're there if I ever need. I don't have to go back and find my notebook that I used it. I can just scan it in there.
That's the one thing I wanted out of a note-taking app, right? That it's searchable. Like I like the crossing out, but at the same time I want to be able to go back to it. That's just, I'm afraid that I lose stuff or I don't have it somewhere. But I find if you can scan it and then tag it with something, then you can do that too.
Just a quick question about multiple emails. Can you have them all sync to Todoist and Evernote? If you had an email through your team and some kids?
I have 6 emails.
Yeah,
in one email app, so I check everything in there, and then I can, depending on
One email app that has them all come into the one email.
Yeah.
Because there's security things.
Yeah, but airmail allows, like somehow they, like my university, yeah, airmail.
Yeah, I've had problems with that. I mean, other than my phone. Yeah, so it probably works the same way as the iPhone, right? So I do have work and my Gmail going into the single inbox in my iPhone. So I imagine airmail probably works exactly the same way. I don't do that here only because I don't want to see my clinical and admin stuff in my research email, right? So I use my Gmail as my research email, and that's how so I don't want to see all the stuff from Chio when I'm working on research, so I keep them separate. But yes, you can, the same, when you have the plugin in Outlook, you click on it and it goes to Todoist. The same plugin in Gmail will go to Todoist as well. Now, clicking on that email, if you're using Outlook and it's a native app and not a web app, you have to be at the computer where Outlook is installed. Whereas Gmail is a web app, so it can be anywhere. Like Outlook, I mean, we don't use Outlook.com, we use Outlook, like the actual app, like this thing here, like with Office. So it doesn't, if you're not at the computer where Outlook is installed, it won't work.
But what if I'm accessing my Outlook through SickKids virtually, like through the virtual network? Would I then be able to?
No, probably not. It won't link you to the VPN, no.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Is there an easy way to link, there probably is, link an email to your Gmail calendar, sorry, your Google Calendar to your Gmail? Like the issue I have is I have appointments in my calendar, and then somebody will send an agenda or documents for that meeting, and then I have to, on the day of the meeting, go to my mail, try and find the email they sent 2 days ago.
So as far as I know, and let me know if you ever found out different because I can't figure it out, as far as I know, the only way to do that is if there's a date and time in the email, you click on that date of time and it'll create a calendar.
Want me to show it to you, Eric?
Yeah. Yes, please. You know how?
Because I forever.
Well, I use a
day of the
different
meeting,
app for
and
that.
I'm digging through my email going,
So use Fantastical as a calendar app?
Oh, so you don't use Google Calendar?
No.
Yeah.
So, but you can use Google Calendar in there, I think, in Fantastical.
Yes, yeah, you can link in your Google Calendar into Fantastical. So Fantastical, I actually use Fantastical on my phone. I just never got into using it on the desktop. But that's not a bad idea.
So there you go.
I like the must attend CCHCSP.
Well, I put that so that my secretaries know that I'm away. I'm just, yeah, see, I'm missing out on that. I'm just looking for, oh, here you go. So here, this was a meeting. It's about trauma orders. And here is the email that again, then, oh, it doesn't click automatically. Oh, no, it doesn't work, eh?
So, and then you have a Fantastical, you would have a Fantastical plugin in Gmail?
In Airmail. Oh, see,
So
that's
there must
how
be
it
a
fails.
Gmail one
Yeah.
as well. So that's the other option, is to use Fantastical instead. And Fantastical is like Airmail, where you can bring in your calendars from a bunch of different sources into the app.
It doesn't work right now. So, yeah, it did before. So when, here is, this is my email. So then I can right click and say send to, and then either create Fantastical event, and I can even just, like, let me see if I can do that here.
So it's worth looking to see if that works in Gmail.
Yeah, it doesn't. So I can drag this email, I can drag to my calendar where it is. So, and like this Airmail, I use for 6 or 7 email accounts.
I noticed you have Sane. I tried that.
Yeah.
That's another, I think this Happy Academic folks recommend that as well. You have to be careful sometimes with these AI stuff. Where
Yeah.
they're
Sanebox,
reading
yeah.
your emails. I got a little paranoid about that.
So I think Sane is safe,
Okay.
but there was others that were not safe. And I know our university, for instance, doesn't allow Outlook.
Outlook.com,
for,
yeah. Because
yeah.
they got into trouble for
storing emails on their servers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Depends on your
but airmail
institution.
is safe and is okay. But you have to be careful a little bit with that stuff. If they store their stuff on their own servers, then potentially it could be somebody could read
The
it.
last thing people wanted to talk about saying no to stuff. Was that you, Shannon?
Oh,
Interruptions.
Oh,
So
interruptions, sorry.
did you actually do the Mentimeter?
Did I do the what?
Did you put in like what you wanted to talk about in the beginning? I have to
did,
check.
but I just said something about balance.
Okay.
Then I realized that what I really wanted to ask was interruptions.
Interruptions.
Now that I
Okay.
have multiple students, like originally
Yep.
it's like I have one student, they can come see me whenever they want, and now I have multiple students and I have staff, and people are like popping their heads in my door all the
Yeah.
time, and I have no oxygen in my office, so if I close my door after
Oh.
about an hour, I fall asleep. Like there's just no air circulation, and I can't figure out how to train people in a polite way to stop popping their head in and saying, "Oh, I just have a quick question."
Okay, well, so you have to ask them first in a polite way, right? I mean, if you don't ask them, they're not going to do it. The other, I was going to suggest shutting your door or putting a sign on your door saying, please do not interrupt working. So that's one option, is you can put a sign so that somewhere that they can see it, and just say, when this sign is up, I'm really sorry, I can't. Third thing is put on the headphones, because if they see you working with headphones, you have an excuse not to answer them when they come in and say hello. And then when eventually they're going to figure out that when you're working with headphones, even if they're not playing music, you're working. And then the fourth thing is to have office hours, right? Where you say, these are the hours where you can come and see me. And all of the time, please email me, or, unless it's an absolute emergency, even that, I don't know that I would open the door to that.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I did
Family
this
crisis
summer,
sort of
because
thing.
I had a bunch of summer students, which I knew was going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Because of volume. I mean, summer students are not a problem, but the volume of them. Because it was easy to train them, because I hadn't trained them badly before. Like my parent staff is more of a problem. Is I said to them, don't come to my office with questions. I will come to you at some point in the morning or in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And if you have a question, write it down.
Yeah.
Ask anybody around you the answer, and if they can't find it, look online. If you can't find the answer when I come see you, then ask me.
Yeah, so that's the
they
other
never come
key
to my office.
that I know, like Tuesdays, I'm at the place where I do my research. So I meet with my research coordinator once a week on Tuesdays. I meet with my postdoc fellow once a week on Tuesdays. We have a bi-weekly lab meeting every 2 weeks of all the grad students. And Tuesdays are the day that I meet with research staff. So they know that I'm there on Tuesdays, and for the most part, they won't interrupt me at other
Well, I have
times.
the same. Thursday morning is like holy. That's the lab day.
And it's the
So
same.
My research coordinator is in the office next to me, and my project coordinator is at a desk right outside my office.
So one of my colleagues has a little sign that he can put on the door. It says, "You're wrong. Even though you see me, I'm not here."
Ah!
Or make your calendar, they can see your calendar, right? So then in your calendar, color.
Yeah, but you're expecting they're going to check your calendar before actually walking in 3 steps away.
And I've stayed home for a couple of hours to just get it done, and I get lots of stuff done. Just not be there.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that.
Yeah, or go to a coffee shop or like another spot where it's just you can't do anything else than do what you need to do, and nobody's gonna know where you are.
Nobody here's a physician, eh? No, it doesn't. Yeah. So, I think this works though for admin staff as well, I hope. So I have an arrangement with the nurse that I work with. We share a patient load. She's the nurse case manager for 150 patients with IBD. And right when I started doing the IBD clinic, I made an arrangement with her that Thursday morning from 9 to 10 we review. If an issue comes up with a patient and it's urgent, needs to be dealt with by the end of the day, email me and I'll address it by the end of the day, I promise. If it's emergency, then text me or call me, but I hate being called. But text me and then I'll respond right away. So, the number of times that she's texted me, I can count on one hand. Emails, here and there, but she'll save the vast majority of things for that Thursday morning from 9 to 10 because she knows that she'll get my full attention. I'm not checking email, I'm not answering other calls, I'm not distracted. From 9 to 10, that's when we review the patients. So if you do that with admin staff as well, right? It's the same.
You can set expectation. You can train people. Like I don't do that as well, but what I've started to do sometimes is I would look at my email late at night because I would work on my email for a little bit, but then send the email the next morning at 8. Schedule the email so that they don't think that I'm sending emails to them at 11, and then maybe they would expect me to look at it at 11, right?
How do you do that?
in that email program, you can do that. You can schedule it whenever you
Do
want.
it in Gmail? Because
I guess you
can. I
I
think there's
Yeah.
want
there's
to
an,
reply, but I don't want them to think I'm actually working.
yeah, I think it's in Gmail Labs.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Save it as draft and send
Yeah,
it in the
you can
morning.
do that
I
too.
think in the labs you can send, if you go to the settings in Google Labs,
Actually, right next to your send button, there's an arrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that, it would allow you to
schedule
send
later.
your email.
And one of my colleagues is super strict about it. She says they can, like my students can only connect with me after hours if like the lab is burning down or something. Like if they start sending emails at 8 o'clock at night, they know I'm not going to look at it, I'm not going to respond,
Yeah,
and we can talk about it tomorrow.
yeah.
I'll send
So-
emails in the middle of the night. I just don't expect people to respond, right? I mean, you can't, again, that'll be in my weekly review. If I've sent an email and I'm waiting for a response, waiting for a response will be in my to-doist. And then when I review every week, I see, oh, I'm still waiting for this response. Should I remind the person gently that I'm waiting for a response?
I just like, especially with students, like I want them to know that I'm emailing them back on the weekend.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go out Monday morning.
Sometimes it's good to have ground rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you set up with your students.
Yeah.
So sending an email in the middle of the night may send a signal that we expect them to do the same.
Yeah, and that's.
And
Yeah.
I make it very clear, please go home, rest,
Yeah.
I will see you on, or if we have to work on something, I say, I am available and we'll email tonight. And that's, so
Yeah.
you have to set the ground
Yeah.
rules and expectations.
I think that's about communication, right?
Do you guys have wrap up, do you want to talk about a little bit of the similar?
Well, we talked a little bit about these things, right? But
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty much everything. It was really left open for you guys to bring up what you wanted
is
to.
there anything you've missed that we should still answer? We want to discuss?
So they're going to be, you're staying for the symposium, right?
Yeah, of course.
I know Richard
Yeah.
is as well. So we're around, so make sure that you come and find us for any additional tips or private questions you want to ask.
Yeah.
And an incredible thank you. I learned so much. I needed this more than anyone else. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It was fun. And if you want us to show you apps that we use for the tech stuff, or I'm not going to show you my journal, but everything else,